Make no mistake, when it comes game day, you want to be your absolute best for your performance. And your feeling makes a crucial impact on how you perform. Today's video is going to be all about game day nutrition and hydration, specifically for the youth hockey player. And this video is really designed to help parents navigate the complexities of essentially picky eaters and ultimately understanding what to eat when. And I'll even break down a little bit of how we need to eat for one game versus a tournament and why it's a little bit different. My name is John Swanson. You'll see my players and alumni skating in the USHL, playing college Division I, Division III, playing in the AHL, NHL, and even the Olympics. Now, there's a couple things before we jump into this. One is I have what is called our summer speed and strength program, and I give it away for free. But the reason why I want to bring it up to you right now is that there's a section in the guide, and I'm going to pull it up, that we break down right here recovery for a player, and then we also have a whole section here on youth nutrition. Okay, and from there we also have optimal nutrition strategies, which is section 7, and we talk about pre-practice, workouts, game nutrition. This is very comprehensive, right? So if you want to read that, it's a 55-page manual designed for hockey players, and what's really cool about it is I've also included at-home training, stick skills, shooting, and then plyometrics and some speed and strength work. It's completely for free, and you can go find it right here. I'm going to put the link below, but it's called our 8-week speed and scoring playbook. The reason why I'm bringing it up to you is that that book covers some things in greater detail about general nutrition, hydration, and just overall like energy systems and performance. I recommend reading that. I've had actually a handful of NHL players that now have youth players that I've sent it to, and they said every hockey player and every parent should read that because it's really eye-opening and it really makes nutrition for your youth player a lot simpler. Now today, that's kind of general nutrition and performance. Today we're going to talk specifically game day nutrition. So I'll put the link below. Head over and all you got to do is click this button and you put your first name, last name, email, and then phone number in there, and it'll send it over. And then what I do with that is once a week, I send out emails with videos like this. And my ultimate goal with X7 Hockey is to provide the families out there, whether it be the player or the parents, the information that I wish my parents had as I was navigating the hockey journey that I went on. Now, before we jump into the actual training, I want to kind of have a cautionary tale here. So one of the things that I've been lucky and blessed to do was play pro hockey. But after I retired, I got to work with hockey players, which I think is even more fun, right? Getting to be a part of this journey and getting to have this impact is really amazing. But something that I see that I want to caution you about is that some of our female athletes, when they come to us for the first time, there's this, immense pressure for female athletes. Specifically, I'm talking now at the collegiate level, and you have this body image, they have this performance, and then they have weight management. There's all these kind of things happening with them, right? And I'm not going to jump in and be an expert in that. What I want to share with you is what I'm going to share with you today is a very powerful thing to know and learn. But you're the adult. You have to understand how to deliver this message and create a positive relationship around fueling the body to be stronger, to have energy. And if you force them into these things, the question starts to be, are you creating a long-term issue with the relationship with food? And what I can tell you is it's worth being patient with the information I'm giving you versus forcing it, because I see the other side of it where we're having, to help players kind of rework how they look at food. And we're not the expert when it comes to, specific, we'll call them eating disorders and things of that. But I think we can help kind of avoid some of that if we educate at a young age and we build positive relationships. So I'm just advocating to the parents here, take some time, be a little patient with how you deliver this message, because there's a long tail impact. And I think it can be a really positive one if done well. I also think it can have a negative impact if done not correctly. So that's kind of my cautionary tale. All right, let's jump into nutrition. So as I said, X7, one of my missions here is I want to share with you why I think nutrition is so important for game day nutrition. Now, if you know a little bit about me, and for those that are new to our channel, one thing you'll know is that I played varsity hockey as a sophomore at 100 pounds, soaking wet. And it was funny, my girlfriend and I, she played varsity soccer, I played hockey, and we were racing to see who could weigh 100 pounds first. I always struggled with weight. And the reason why I actually struggled with weight, I didn't learn this till later on, is I had essentially a gut disorder, which I did not absorb my nutrients well. And so that's something that we actually test for in our X7 Elite. We actually team up with a team of doctors and scientists with our hockey players, and we take them through a full digestive health protocol to ensure that they're actually absorbing the nutrients. So I didn't learn this till later on. So here I go to college, now I'm 165 pounds, 5'11". I was skinny. And I tried to eat. I didn't know what I was doing, but I was trying, right? The effort was there, but I wouldn't absorb my nutrients. So I wouldn't absorb the proteins or the carbs. It would kind of just flush through me. And then when I got to pro, I played pro at really 168. And now I walk at 195. And what I learned is once I solved that essentially gut disorder that I was personally dealing with, I was actually able to build a lot more lean muscle. It's kind of a little too late, but now I'm like, man, if I would have weighed 195 when I was playing in the AHL, what could have been with my career, right? How would it have been different having that extra, 30 pounds of muscle? And what I want to help you guys understand is there's two major points today: how to fuel for game days, but understand there's a general health concept here, and it's why we incorporate it with our players, whether it be our college, our pros, or even our youth. Nutrient absorption is critical, because just because you put it in your body doesn't mean you're absorbing it. And that's, maybe if I don't share anything else today and you just take that message away, is that just because your player's eating it, the question we have to ask is, are they absorbing the nutrients? And there's different ways to test for that. But if your son or daughter is consistently dealing with, say, diarrhea, gas, these are symptoms that we want to start to pay attention to. We at X7, like I said, team with experts that specialize in that level of, we'll call it health and performance, to ensure our players are not dealing with that. And if they are, they create solutions for them. Whether you work with us or not, my big thing here is when it comes to nutrition as a generality, number one, we want to create a positive relationship with it. Number two is we want to make sure that just because the player's eating it, we have to make sure they're absorbing it. And the way we can take a look at that is what are we'll call it post-meal symptoms. We have a specific tool, a tracker that we'll take our players through, but we ultimately look at, bloating. Are they gassy? Did they get diarrhea? Essentially, what was the cause and effect post-meal? And if it's constant with these symptoms, we want to start to explore other avenues, because it could be a early indicator that the nutrition that's coming in their body is not having the time to fully absorb, which essentially means it's going to take you twice as much food, and really ultimately your energy levels are not going to be correct because your body's dealing with this underlying issue. So anyways, you guys ready to jump into game day nutrition? Because I am. So let's jump over. I've created this document for you and I'm going to share it with you. It's right here and it's called Game Day Nutrition. So we're going to jump over to it right now. All right, so we're here with our Game Day Nutrition document. Now, the first thing is this is not, we'll call it comprehensive game day nutrition. This is meant to be kind of a high level thought process around game day nutrition. There's a lot of nuances. My goal is not to overwhelm you, but to simplify it. So to simplify it, let's just start with this. If all you take away from this section is called the 4-2-1 rule, I think you're going to be well on your way. So work backwards from puck drop, and ultimately 1 hour before the game, 1 hour before the game, you want to have some type of energy boosting snack, like an applesauce or a rice cake. A lot of times these are going to be consumed in the locker room. And I'll kind of talk about, how much of that here in a little bit. 2 hours before, this might be right before you depart for game day, the athlete should focus on a carb-loaded snack like a piece of fruit. So it's essentially like the 1 hour, but you're 2 hours out, you're essentially getting some good, we'll call it low glycemic carbohydrates in your system, or some type of healthy fruit. 4 hours out, now we're having more of a balanced meal. However, it's going to be light in fiber and it's going to be light in fats. And the reason being is that we don't want to have any digestive issues or nutrient absorption, which fiber can affect, and then fats can have some digestive problems. We don't want to have them essentially feeling like they have a funny tummy when they get to the rink. So if all you take away 4 hours before, we want a good balanced meal. And I'll break that down. And then 2 hours before, they're having a good snack, but it's a little bit more carbohydrate loaded. And then 1 hour before to really a half hour before is kind of that window there. What we're having there is, typically a quick digestion carbohydrate, something like an applesauce or a rice cake or even a Rice Krispies bar. So let's jump into why this matters first and foremost. So how you feel essentially the day before, really the 3 days before, and then the day of game is going to help maximize energy output. It's going to help protect and maintain muscles, and it's going to prevent dehydration during the game. Now, I'm not going to read every word for word on this document. I'm going to share it with you. You can go through it, but I'm going to hit the high level things. So quickly, how much does a player need to eat? Well, the easiest way to measure and make sure that we're getting a balance is when we look at protein, take the player's palm, so the palm of their hand, and the thickness of that, that's roughly how much protein they should be consuming. So I want you to picture like your hand right now, and then if I was gonna make you a plate of food, a good starting point, this is not perfection, but just a good starting point would be one palm of protein. Now when we look at veggies, which are gonna be a lot of our micronutrients, a fist of veggies is solid for a general plate, and then we can look at somewhere between a 1 cupped hand of carbohydrates. Now with athletes, we might up that to 2 or 3. And so of all the things that we're actually going to up, it's going to be those carbohydrates because of the glycemic, essentially energy that they need. They're using the quads, they're using the hammies, they're using the glutes, big muscles that require lots of energy. And then finally, for hormonal function, we need good healthy fats. That's how to build just we'll call a balanced plate. What I like about this is if you're on the road or even if you're working with a 10-year-old, we have taught our 10-year-old daughter this method of like, hey, does your plate right now have a palm of protein? Does it have a fist of vegetables? Do you have at least 1 to 2 cups of your hand of carbohydrates? And then what is your healthy fat? And so again, teaching them that protein builds strength, veggies builds health, and then carbs build energy, and fat ultimately builds health. Is helping create that what I refer to as a positive relationship with nutrition and food for our daughter. Okay, so here's a quick example for a game. This would depended on maybe like my daughter, 1 palm size protein. We could go grilled chicken breasts. We would cut it up for her, and then we do 2 cupped hands of carbohydrates. So whether it be a brown rice or white rice, and then 1 fist size of veggies. She likes carrots, so we'd maybe give her some carrots, and then 1 thumb portion of healthy fats. What I would most likely do here is just put a little olive oil on her chicken when I'm cooking it, and that's how she's getting her fats. All right, so we just went through essentially understanding like what we'll call quantity of food. Now we're going to look at hydration. So simply put, general rule is roughly half your body weight in ounces. It's not the perfect standard, but it's a good start. Understand that dehydration impacts brain function, reduces endurance, decreases strength and power, and then it's going to increase heart rate, which we do not want. So how do we stay hydrated? Number 1, just think about like during the 4-2-1, we're also consuming water and then possibly some type of electrolytes as well. To make sure that we have proper electrolyte balance within the system. Step 2, immediately after practice, workout, and games, they're having some type of a liquid. Typically, I don't actually have our athletes drink water right after a game per se. What they're normally having is a protein shake, which has the water in it. And so we kind of do that combination. So they're actually getting protein back in the body, but it's also hydrating them as well. And then this is important in something that we've actually taught our children is this is essentially a guide to walk you through like how hydrated you are. Now, the big thing here is that if you're taking a vitamin, say you're an adult, vitamins will change the color of urine. But on top of that, toilet water will dilute the color of urine. But just in general, let's say that you're right here, you think you're, dehydrated, but you're actually closer to here because of the toilet water. So just kind of general note there, but again, the quantity of food and then hydration, 2 big what we'll call essential buckets. All right, so I've broken this down. I call it 4 phases, apology. It's 6 phases. it really makes 4 phases, but there's some different situations here with, is your player resurfacing and so on and so forth. So let's jump into it. Really, phase 1 is that 4-hour window, and this is essentially having a full meal. And so what to eat, we want to choose a carbohydrate that is low glycemic option. Sweet potato, brown rice, oats, whole wheat pasta are all great options. What we're really looking here is we don't want to spike blood sugar. This is not the right time to spike it. We're too far away from essentially the window when we're going to go into essentially a high energy output. From there, we want to opt for lean protein. And what you'll see here is I'm noting like a chicken breast or turkey. And the reason being is that they're typically a much leaner cut of meat than like say a steak. The steak is typically going to have, number one, it's harder to digest. And number two, it's got fat in it, which can have some digestive issues. So on game day, typically 1 to 1.5 palms of protein. Understand that 4 hours out, the goal is not to put a ton of protein in the belly. We would rather be, low glycemic carbohydrate heavy and then have enough protein. And then we're going to have a minimum healthy fat. Not to say we can't have any, but we're not going to go overkill. Look at like your olive oils to add some satiety without, ultimately slowing down the digestive process. So I'm going to actually share with you my go-to meal when I played pro. And this was after kind of figuring out, some of my digestive stuff. What I responded really well to was 1 large chicken breast. I would have some sauteed bell peppers. And then I would have, and these were typically cooked in olive oil, and then I would have 1 large sweet potato, and I would have a little dollop of grass-fed butter, unsalted, and then I would put cinnamon powder on it, and that was legit my go-to meal. And then I would have some water, and then I would get set up for my pregame nap. So that's the first phase. That's really your first major meal. Now let's say, and I don't jump into this a lot, but if you're going to eat the night before, you would essentially resemble a meal like this. Okay. All right, now we're essentially that immediate pregame snack. So this is, roughly, we'll call it 1 hour before you're having. So this is kind of the 4, this would really be the 1 hour out, kind of depending on, your structure, your schedule. You need to have this ideally close to that 45-minute window. But this is where we're having an applesauce, a rice cake and honey, some type of orange, and then we're having some more water. So that's really what we're looking at right there. Applesauce is going to provide your fast source of glucose, which supports the liver glycogen and enhances mental sharpness. So notice I did not put a banana here, and I'll explain why in a little bit. Otherwise, we're going with a rice cake and honey, and then I like to pair that with an orange. I think the orange just kind of brings their senses up a little bit. That vitamin C, and then just the way the orange kind of hits the palate, and then having some water. The reason why we don't go with a banana right now is that, in contrast, while bananas are great for post-game due to their potassium content, which is great for recovery and muscle function, they're slightly higher in fiber and take longer to digest. They can delay the release of glucose in the liver, making applesauce the better option. So a little fun fact, if you're on my team, we have bananas in the locker room for post-game. We have applesauce in the locker room for pre-game. All right, so let's talk in-game hydration. And this is where things get a little weird, because some of you are going to be playing games where you have a resurface and some of you are not. But simply put, when you're in a game, what I like to do is you can either have a sugar-free sports drink if needed. Like I know my daughter likes to have Propel in her water bottle. But for the most part, what we're really doing is having a little bit of water, and then really we're just trying to wet the palate. We're not trying to drink a lot of water on the bench. Like if you watch pros, they're not chugging water. You'll often see them, put it in their mouth and they spit it out on the ice. And the reason being is they're just keeping their mouth from drying out, but they're not ultimately trying to put a ton of water in their system. So just kind of in-game hydration, we're essentially we're drinking a little, but it's probably drinking 25% of what water actually goes in your mouth. From there, if we have an in-game break, sometimes we'll play in tournaments where we do get a resurface. A lot of our girls will jump to an applesauce packet in between, and then they might have some type of carbohydrate drink as well. So they're essentially getting, again, more carbohydrates back in the system during that time. And again, we're just trying to put as much glycogen storage back in, and then again, just helping them feel and stabilize blood sugar so that they're feeling good mentally and then physically. All right, so now game is over. You guys just won. Everybody's feeling good vibes in the locker room. What we're gonna do now, ideally, is have a protein shake, and then we pair it with 1 to 2 bananas. So the protein is gonna start to put in some amino acids to start to repair any muscle tissue breakdown, and then the carbohydrates are gonna put some potassium that are gonna help start to replenish energy and electrolyte balance, but they're also going to help with delivering the protein or the amino acids to the muscle belly to start the recovery process. Now, if we're on the road, say, and for a lot of our tournaments at a younger age, we're always on the road, so we'll go with a pre-made protein. So I've linked, like an example. And if we're at home, this is more of like our college players, we'll go with a Thorne isolate. Isolate being essentially one of the purest forms of protein. And then Thorne is our brand that we use. It's NSF certified, which is really important for our college and pro players. And so we're essentially jumping on that recovery window right away. If bananas aren't available, then we'll go back to an applesauce or Rice Krispies. Just note that, you're gonna have applesauce overkill here, so I'd like to switch it out. I'd like to see, somebody go with a banana, but if for whatever reason, say you're allergic to bananas, there's other options out there, but you're thinking about just what is a quick digesting carb that you can pair with your protein. All right, let's go into recovery meal. So this is what I wanna pause here, and if you're, like, say, playing in a tournament where you're back-to-back games, what you're gonna need to do here is, because you had the protein shake already, you're really gonna just need to get carbs back in the system, and you're trying to get as much carbohydrates in there, but carbohydrates that are gonna help you feel light. And that's your, your kind of your fruits, your applesauces, and then, maybe some rice in between. Nothing that's gonna make you feel heavy. Now, if you're, don't have a game until maybe the next day, or you're, practice the next day, you're gonna have a good amount of protein. This really can be anywhere from 1 to 2 palm size, kind of depending on the player. And then again, based off the player size of the athlete, 3 to 10 cups. I mean, you could really load up on carbs. So our big players, 200-pound, forwards, they're going to be eating a ton of carbs because of how much they have to get back in the system. Healthy fats 1 to 2, and then veggies 1 to 2 again. So they're having a big meal essentially, right? We want to get as much of that carbohydrate reloaded back in the system. Now, one thing that's interesting is that as I played college and pro, I was never really hungry after games. And so what I would do is I would have a tendency, and I talked about this down below here, is I would lean on a protein shake, and then I would throw a lot of carbohydrates in there to get the process started. And then I might not eat for maybe 2 to 3 hours later, just because I really struggled. I just wasn't hungry after a game. All right, so now let's take a look. If we're at home, what's nice about this is we could, if I was, post game, I'd maybe have, a chicken breast and a half, or 1 big chicken breast, which would be roughly 2 palms. And then I have some white rice and pasta, maybe 3 to 5 cupped hands. And then I'd have lightly steamed veggies and then mixed berries. That would be like my post-game meal. Now, if we're on the road, and I have this teed up down below here, I have a bunch more options, but I might be going to like a Chipotle bowl. You could even possibly go burrito here, pizza, thin crust, or that protein shake that I talked about. Again, we want to make sure that we're jumping on recovery right away for the athletes. Here's 3 common mistakes. Skip high fat or high fiber foods before games, avoid junk food, and then experimenting on game day is not recommended. If you're going to do any major food changes, I would actually do it around practice to make sure that your child tolerates it well, so that way you go into essentially game day knowing what their stomach and digestive system is going to enjoy. So I put in 10 tips for success. Use what you want. Timing and flexibility. So everything is just generality here today. I'm not saying you should do exactly what I'm saying. What I'm sharing with you is what's worked for my players. The one thing that I'll tell you is that all my players are different. And so you might need to adjust timing accordingly based off of your unique son or daughter, and that's okay. The second one, portions, adjust, right? For a smaller player, they may not be able to eat 7 cups of rice. That would just be way too much for their digestive system, and that's fine. But a college player or a pro player might have to. And so that's the key here, is nothing is written in law. It's written as a school of thought, and then your job is to adjust accordingly for your unique situation. Tournaments and back-to-back games, you want to think about keeping things light. You know, you could look at you could look at NSF certified protein bars, which are basically saying, you know, they have in their label what's actually there. You could have Greek yogurt with honey. You could have individual nut butter packets and rice cake, and then higher carbohydrates, multi-game days. You're going to want to look at, you know, essentially, even if you're stuck at a rink, it sounds crazy, go have a pretzel. That's good carbohydrates. You know, have a Gatorade that's maybe not sugar-free because it'll have a higher carb intake. You essentially just need to get carbs back in your system. Especially when you're playing back-to-back, I'm less concerned about protein intake and I'm more concerned about carbohydrate, essentially refueling. All right, fast food options. Again, this is not meant to be the perfect list, but it's just helping you kind of look at, like, if I was to walk in Chipotle, I might have a burrito bowl with white rice, grilled chicken, fajitas, and salsa. And then I would maybe have a small guacamole for healthy fats, but I would skip the cheese or sour cream to keep fat content low as a generality. You know, if we're at Starbucks, you know, you got a protein box. At Panera, we have turkey or chicken salad, right? You're dealing with your child, so you're gonna have to figure out what they're willing to do. Each child is, you know, got their own. Some kids, like I have one child in my house, they'll eat whatever I put in front of them. I have one that, you know, it's always a conversation about whether or not they're willing to eat it. So that's where you're gonna have to adjust accordingly. And then I put a note in here about, you know, specific supplements that we kind of use. I like Thorne. You can go and check out the brand, but that's what we use with our athletes. So the Thorne Whey Protein Isolate, creatine, which is really great. Pretty much #1 studied supplement in the world. Every athlete should be on it at some level, and it's great for not preventing concussions, but there is a lot of research that shows that if you're on creatine pre-concussion, it has some really positive impacts for recovery from that. And then amino acids, which are just, again, rounding out the protein to make sure all the aminos are there, and then electrolytes to help with hydration. So these are, you know, literally 4 supplements that I have our athletes take. And jumping down to 6, practicing nutrition on game days. We kind of touched on that. 7, build a constant mindset around nutrition. And this is where I talked at the start of the video. We don't want to build a bad relationship with food. We want to make it be very positive, in that, you know, essentially it builds strength, it builds speed, it builds power. Quick reference guide. So you could theoretically, I think, screenshot this if you wanted. You just come here, and then if you wanted just to throw this in your phone, it just kind of breaks down the phases. It's not perfect, but it allows you just to say, okay, you know, we're 4 hours out. What do we need to be thinking about as you're kind of adopting this? Adapting to weather conditions. If hotter conditions, you're going to need to pay a little bit more attention to electrolytes just due to sweating. If colder conditions, prioritize warming up properly and avoid drinking extremely cold beverages before the game to prevent muscle tightness. And then finally, digestive and food sensitivities. I talked about that. You need to respect the digestive needs of athletes. So pay attention to what they're eating and how it impacts them. And this is really where having an open conversation with your athlete about what they're eating and what was essentially the cause and effect in the next hour of how they felt, whether they bloated, diarrhea, were they gassy, that will start to give us telltale signs of what is happening from an absorption and also an energy level. And then choose gentle foods for recovery. So foods like applesauce, white rice, and lean proteins are generally well tolerated and easier on the stomach, supporting effect recovery without causing GI distress. So we want to ultimately keep it as low on the distress as much as we can. All right, so there you have it. That is what has worked well for essentially my 2 little ones, and then ultimately the players that I coach. It's not meant to be like a rule of thumb of this is what you must do. And again, if anything you were to take out of this, let's create a positive relationship around nutrition for our athletes. Number 2, the 4-2-1 method. 4 hours out, full meal. 2 hours out, we're having some type of good healthy snack. 1 hour out, we're having some type of fruit, and it's okay there to spike blood sugar just because we're about to go out and use that spike of energy. And then in between a game, you're looking to maintain the carbohydrates, and then again, post-meal, you're having a full, essentially recovery meal. And then the last component of this is let's be aware of GI distress because it might be a telltale sign that we're not absorbing all the nutrients. And so if you have somebody that's a hard gainer, there's one school of thought, which is they're not getting enough calories in. And then the second school of thought is they might be getting enough calories in, but they may not be absorbing the nutrients. Both can impact ultimately a player's weight. Again, going back to the first rule here, which is let's create a positive relationship around that. So you're the parent, you're the adult here, you're gonna know what's working best for your child, but just understand there is a long-term impact of how you open this conversation up. It can either be really, really positive or it can have a negative impact. And what I hope is that you take this away and I have empowered you with some tools and strategies to help create a positive relationship around food for your athlete and ultimately help them succeed on game day. Again, my name is John Swanson. This is X7 Hockey Talk. And if you made it this far, just a reminder, you have that 8-week speed and scoring program. And I have a full breakdown of a much greater detail of nutrition. So you should definitely check that out. And if you found this video useful, please share it with a fellow hockey family or even an association.